Wagwan, everybody. I am your Jamaican queen, Miss Y. You are tuned into How I See It TV, and this is Accurate Context. Colorist behavior has been present on RHOP since season 1. The light-skinned women are able to have conflicts, say the most vile things to and about each other, apologize, throw more shade in their confessionals, but still manage to coexist without the level of toxic energy, isolation, and the level of disgust they show to the darker skinned women, i.e. Candace and Wendy, when they're in conflict with them. In this video, I'm going to define colorism, colorist behavior, and the word colorist. I'm also going to give examples of the colorist behavior I've observed as it relates to the Real Housewives of Potomac cast, specifically Giselle and Ashley. Let's get into it. When discussing colorism, a colorist refers to someone who perpetuates or supports discriminatory attitudes, beliefs, or actions based on skin color. So when Candace says in interviews, "I don't believe my castmates are colorists," I believe that Candace is basing that opinion on this definition. Once again, the definition states, a colorist refers to someone who perpetuates or supports discriminatory attitudes, beliefs, or actions based on skin color. Colorism is a form of prejudice or discrimination that favors individuals with lighter skin tones over those with darker skin tones, often within the same racial or ethnic group. On the other hand, colorist behavior refers to the actions, behaviors, or practices that contribute to or reinforces colorist attitudes and discrimination. It includes actions such as promoting or valuing lighter skin tones over darker ones, making derogatory comments about individuals with darker skin, or participating in systems that perpetuate unequal treatment based on skin color, using dog whistles, not acknowledging any unconscious bias if and when they are called out, and participating in featureism, where one holds or upholds European standards of beauty. Colorist behavior can sometimes be unconscious. There are various books that discuss the concept of unconscious bias and how it can manifest in colorist behavior. One such book is Blind Spot: Hidden Biases of Good People by Mazarine R. Banerjee and Anthony G. Greenwald. This book delves into the idea that individuals can uphold implicit biases and prejudices without being aware of them. It explores the science behind unconscious bias and provides insight on how these biases can affect our perceptions and behavior, including colorist attitude and actions. Blind Spot offers a valuable perspective on understanding and addressing unconscious biases, including those related to colorism. Because yes, it is possible for a person with an unconscious bias to not be consciously aware of their colorist behavior. Unconscious biases are automatic and unintentional attitudes or stereotypes that we hold towards a certain group of people, including those based on skin color or race. These biases can influence our perceptions, decisions, and behaviors without our conscious awareness. These books probe that colorism, which is the discrimination or prejudice based on skin color, can be influenced by unconscious biases. Even if someone like Giselle, Ashley, or Robin genuinely believe they are not colorists and they don't hold colorist values, they may still exhibit colorist behavior unknowingly due to their unconscious biases. Thus, like Wendy said in part 2 of the RHOP Season 8 reunion, it is important to ask why, and it is important to recognize that unconscious biases can influence our actions, even if they are contrary to our conscious beliefs. Now that that's covered, let's get into the examples of colorist behavior on The Real Housewives of Potomac. Now, the conversation of colorism and the conversation surrounding race didn't begin with Candace or Wendy. It was the main focus on The Real Housewives of Potomac from the minute the show was casted all through season 1. Robin on the really, what do they call their podcast? The Reasonably Shady podcast, stated that when she was casted for the show and she saw who the people were that were going to be on the cast, she told them that viewers would not relate to the cast because it was a bunch of light-skinned women. So from the inception of The Real Housewives of Potomac, there was an understanding that, one, it would not be a good look to have an entire cast of a black franchise be light-skinned women. And after that, we get to the season 1 reunion when Katie and Ashley both called out Giselle's and Robin's proximity to whiteness. Sure, they didn't say white-looking ass like Candace did during last season reunion when she was speaking to Giselle. However, Ashley and Katie's sentiments about Giselle and Robin looking white carries the same weight as Candace's words if we would stop tone policing Candace. Ashley, for 3 seasons straight, was very antagonistic. She said Charisse looks like a walrus, said that Charisse had sagging titties. She called Ray's penis shriveled up and old. She attacked Karen's marriage constantly attacked Robin's relationship with Juan, accused Monique of drunk driving, berated Katie's mental health situation when she knew Katie had just, or Katie, my accent, when she knew Katie had just experienced the worst trauma any woman could go through. But none of those things are constantly rehashed in the same way the cast rehashes Candace's words or behavior every season. In fact, after season 3, Ashley was able to come back with a clean slate. She was able to come back with a clean slate. It was almost like these women forgot how Ashley behaved between season 1 and season 3. And guess what? During these conflicts that Ashley had with all these women on RHOP, none of them referred to Ashley as aggressive, violent, antagonistic, vile, ferocious, or a rabid dog. But you know who was referred to as such whenever they are in conflict with any of these women? Wendy and Candace, the 2 dark-skinned women on the cast. Now, Giselle wants to sit and say that because her dad was a part of the civil rights movement and she grew up in the South, and they had crosses burned on their lawns, and they got death threats. And because she went to an HBCU, she can't be colorist. Well, in my opinion, Giselle has an unconscious bias because her father, this leader in the civil rights movement, was the same one in the 1970s who referred to the great political leader of that time, Dr. Barbara Jordan. He referred to her as the Aunt Jemima of politics. And if you have any level of education, any level of history, any level of Black history, then you know that calling a Black woman, a dark-skinned Black woman at that, Aunt Jemima, is super derogatory. And it's based on colorist sentiments. Because he would not have called a light-skinned woman the Aunt Jemima of politics. You know why? Because Aunt Jemima is a dark-skinned Black character who is basically the caretaker of white people's homes. She's basically a maid, basically a servant. So no, he would not have referred to a light-skinned woman in politics as the Aunt Jemima of politics, because that woman would not have looked like an Aunt Jemima. He also went on to call her a mammy. Can't call a light-skinned woman that, because a light-skinned woman doesn't match with the characteristics of such derogatory terms. So Giselle is aware that you can be the leader of the civil rights movement, you can go to an HBCU, you can marry a dark-skinned Black man. It doesn't mean that you cannot be colorist or display colorist behavior. And one could say Giselle's dad was exhibiting colorist behavior because one, Dr. Barbara Jordan, she was a dark-skinned Black woman holding a higher level in politics than he did. And he didn't like that. He didn't like that. And when we look at it from the historical standpoint, y'all, the enslaved, the dark-skinned men and women, they were out there in the fields, in the harshest of conditions, both because of Mother Nature and because of the physical abuse that they had to endure. And though at the end of the day, all of them were enslaved, the ones who got to work in the house, who were servers, who were maids, who were cooks, the ones who were taking care of the white children, they didn't endure as much as the ones who were working out there in the field. And so, when enslavement ended, people passed on to their children a certain level of trauma. And part of that trauma was that the closer you are to whiteness is the better off your life would be, because that's what they saw on the plantation. So mothers were encouraging their sons to go marry a light-skinned woman. And mothers were encouraging their daughters to marry a light-skinned man. Because if you can have light-skinned children with light eyes and hair that could be straightened and they could pass for white, your life might be a little bit better than the life your dark-skinned mother and her mother and her grandmother and her great-grandmother and her great-great-great-grandmother had to endure. And some of that thinking is still passed down today in this generation. That's where colorism stems from. Ashley attacked Candace on social media, branding her with derogatory remarks about her appearance and her family's wealth. But astonishingly, when Candace replied to Ashley's attack, Candace was villainized by her castmates who refused to hold Ashley accountable for not prioritizing her delivery of her baby over an online beef with Candace. The double standard was glaring in that moment, and it highlighted the unequal treatment based on skin color within the Real Housewives of Potomac cast. Because how is it Candace's fault that Ashley is in the hospital having her baby, but Ashley was on social media attacking Candace and Katie at the time too, calling Candace hamster face, talking about Candace has dry hay on her head. Candace was minding her business on that Sunday. And when she got wind of Ashley's tweet and she started to clap back, what did Ashley do? She deleted her tweets that she tweeted out first. And then the women, they all went to the season 4 reunion, having a hard-on for Candace, and none of them acknowledged or asked Ashley, why were you in the hospital getting ready to have your baby, but you are on social media tweeting at Candace first? None of them asked that question. It was all on Candace. The issue was only Candace. Season 6, we witnessed Mia, another light-skinned woman, physically invading Candace and Wendy's personal space twice. Mia was hurling insults and degrading Ascala, Wendy, and Candace, calling them broke bitches. But shockingly, when Candace responded by referring to Mia as a streetwalker, and then throwing a piece of lettuce on the counter towards Mia to punctuate Mia's bird-like behavior, what did Mia do? Mia pretended that Candace started it. She told them that the issue was Candace was calling her a streetwalker, but never told them that Candace called her a streetwalker because she referred to Candace as a broke bitch. In fact, Giselle went as far as to suggest that if Mia had physically assaulted Candace, she would have been fine with that. See, the only 2 women on the Real Housewives of Potomac who have been physically assaulted are the dark-skinned women. See, there's some level of a display of normalizing violence and dismissiveness towards the dark-skinned women. And that is a clear manifestation of colorist behavior. Because Monique also sat on her social media platform and said, well, I assaulted Candace because no one else on the cast has ever come at me like they wanted to fight. Monique said this on Instagram, but that's not true, because Robin approached Monique like she wanted to fight, and what did Monique do? She walked away. She said, I have too much to lose, so I'm not going to fight you. But she fought Candace, who wasn't even in her face in the same way that Robin was in her face during season 3, that whole umbrella incident. Colorist behavior. Karen Huger, a light-skinned woman, freely called Giselle a broken whore from Hampton. She insinuated that Giselle had a sexually transmitted disease, that Giselle had some mental issues that landed her in a mental institution, allegedly. And then Giselle said that that Karen was a drunk who was cheating on her husband. But those words were brushed off as harmless shade, while anything that Candace says to defend herself is always deemed as Candace is taking things too far. A policing of Candace's tone and a policing of Candace's reactions to somebody else's actions towards her. The discrepancy in how behavior is perceived and judged on the Real Housewives of Potomac is a salient illustration of the biases perpetuated by colorism. During season 7, Wendy, a darker-skinned woman, faced physical assault from Mia. Not once, but twice. Astonishingly, and I'm being funny, y'all, Giselle openly declared that she dislikes Wendy, and she expressed her indifference towards the assault. And then we had Robin laughing and recording the incident and saying that Wendy was the one who was being antagonistic towards Mia. And then Robin got in her feelings because Candace defended Wendy and didn't agree that Wendy was more condescending than anybody else on the cast. See, this callous disregard, or that callous disregard for Wendy's well-being on that trip, and the lack of support from majority of the women on the cast, it further perpetuated the cycle of colorist behavior on the Real Housewives of Potomac. Perhaps the most striking example of colorist behavior within RHOP is the disparity in the reactions towards Candace's defense of her husband's character. See, Giselle and Ashley and Deborah, they can all add sauce to a situation involving Candace's husband. And they didn't face as much criticism as one would expect. However, when Candace defends her husband's character, she's deemed as wrong. It's deemed acceptable for Giselle to make innuendos, but it is deemed too far when Candace uses the phrase dwindling uterus. Make that make sense? Because it doesn't. It only highlights the unfair treatment and bias that darker-skinned women face within the show. As Chris pointed out, Candace should be held accountable for her words. But Giselle can say, oh, I used the wrong words when I said that Chris made me go into the hotel room and made me close the door. And then her apology was a non-apology because she sat there and said she didn't say it. And then she said, well, if I said it, I'm sorry, I used the wrong words. And that's okay. That's not called into question. But everything Candace does is called into question. Everything Candace says is called into question, and she needs to account for it and apologize for it. Colorist behavior. Candace comes from a household where her mom, dad, and stepdad were doctors. They had some money. She didn't have to struggle financially, even into adulthood. And in a group of mostly light-skinned women, Candace is a college graduate. She worked for the Obama-led White House. She had several high-level executive jobs, including some in finance and in marketing. However, Candace was shamed her first season and several seasons after that because supposedly she was supposed to be embarrassed that she comes from wealth and that her parents ensured she had access to generational wealth and never had to struggle. Ashley sat on the season 3 reunion as her restaurant was failing and about to close down and said that Candace was the least accomplished of all the women on the cast. Candace, as I said, who worked for the Obama-led administration. Candace, who is a national pageant title holder. Candace, who is degreed up. Candace, who had 3 businesses before she came on The Real Housewives of Potomac, businesses that are still in existence today, was deemed as the least accomplished on the stage. You know what? None of the women at the time corrected Ashley. They sat there and they allowed that sentiment to ring on and on and on. And then when we think about it, Ashley and Mia were not shamed for growing up in poverty. In fact, it seems as if in that group, it is more acceptable to sleep around with a married man. It's more acceptable to lay up on your back in order to get access to some wealth. It's more acceptable to be the Mias of the world than it is to be a Candace. Let that sink in for a second. In that group, it was made to seem like you can only be accomplished if you are married to or were married to a man who had a little bit of status or a little bit of money. So Giselle was successful because she was once married to a cheating, philandering pastor. Robin is successful because she was married to a now broke basketball player. Ashley is successful because she married an old white man who's buying out war-torn parts of Africa. Ashley's successful because her white husband could sponsor what ended up being a failing restaurant. And Mia is successful because she married G, whose family owned massage and franchises and a chiropractic franchise. And she could come on the show and lie about her status in that organization But Candace, who walked upon that show as a HBCU graduate who worked for the Obama-led administration, was not deemed successful. Oh, and I forgot, Monique, who was also hated on, was also deemed as more successful because she married an NFL player who ended up sponsoring her life after she was living in her van, allegedly. But as I was saying, Candace, who was an HBCU grad, who worked for the White House, whose resume also included being an executive at several hotel chains, was deemed as the least accomplished simply because her parents set her up for success. Simply because her mom didn't want her daughter out here struggling to buy her first home and helped her pay for her first home. But we don't understand colorist behavior on that show, because that in and of itself is colorist behavior. That all these light-skinned women who are mediocre at best, because to this day, we don't know what Giselle did for a living. We know some of what Robin did because she came on the show broke and she had to break down how she had to be working herself to the white meat to help get Juan's money back. So she had a trucking business. She was doing real estate. Now she's doing hat. And Candace disclosed during an interview last season that Robin was also once in PR. But when we're looking at it from season 1 to now, what was Giselle's career? What did Giselle have going on that made her so successful that Candace should have been labeled the least successful on the stage during season 3 by Ashley? What did Monique have going on outside of being married to a wealthy man? Ashley's restaurant was literally being shut down as she sat there and said that. What made her so successful? Karen hadn't worked a day in her life for years and years and years since she married Ray. And before she got on The Real Housewives of Potomac. So what made Karen more accomplished than Candace when Ashley sat on that reunion stage in season 3 and said all that? And then, as I said, none of those women corrected Ashley. They sat there and they welcomed that rhetoric that Candace was the least accomplished on the stage, when in fact, on paper, academically, and professionally, she was more accomplished than all of them put together. Colorist behavior is Giselle letting us know on the reunion stage that she was told that they, meaning the executives or production or whoever, they were going to talk to Candace. They told me that she was going to be spoken to. And then Candace confirming during her Entertainment Tonight exclusive about her being pregnant that she was asked by the executives to tone it down for the reunion in a spirit of moving forward. So the dark-skinned girl was asked to tone herself down. She was asked to not be herself, while the light-skinned woman was able to sit on that reunion stage and not take ownership for anything that she's done or said on the Real Housewives of Potomac platform from season 1 to season 8. She sat there and said, well, I'm gonna be waiting to see all the ownership that's gonna be taking place, because she knew that the conversation she had with executives, in my opinion, did not include her taking ownership for anything that she's done. But she knew that the conversation that the executives would have with Candace would include Candace should tone it down. Candace should be a little bit more quiet. Candace should own her part so that the show can move forward. Candace should apologize. Candace should account for her behavior. But please, somebody tell me, when did Giselle take account for anything that she did? She barely took account for her saying, Chris made me go into a hotel room with him alone and made me close the door. Because she said, I didn't say it. And then she said, well, if I said it, I used the wrong words. Not I'm sorry for saying that, because it isn't the truth. It's I used the wrong words. But Candace should tone it down and not address that. Candace should tone it down and not address that light-skinned woman calling her that thing during the season. Candace and Wendy should tone it down, and Wendy not address how Giselle referred to her mom as a witch. And threw her cheating ex-pastor in the mix to validate the sentiments that Wendy's mom is just evil. It's just so evil. Furthering a narrative that Giselle herself doesn't understand from a cultural standpoint. But these women couldn't check her because they were asked to tone it down. How about not coming for Giselle so hard this season? You know, her dad died. And Giselle sat there with a smirk on her face and carried on in such a vile way on that reunion stage. And Candace and Wendy, they took it. They should save their vitriol, but Giselle, absolutely. Go ahead. Be as mean-spirited as you want to be. And y'all don't understand colorism, and y'all don't understand colorist behavior, because that in of itself is colorist behavior. Candace, what would you have done with that bottle? Would you have really hit her? How about Ashley? You saw that your friend was threatening a member of this cast. Why would you bring her around? Ashley, why were you questioning whether or not the cameras were down? Did you know that Deborah was about to confront Candace? How about Giselle? Why are you trying to make it Candace's fault, or Wendy's fault, or Kiana's fault that Deborah came into that event on a mission to be confrontational? That's Ashley's friend. Ashley's your business partner. Why should Candace defend her choice in wanting to defend herself when she was dancing, minding her business, and Deborah walked up to her. And after she told that lady to get out of her face, and she told Ashley, get the help out of my face, get her out of my space, Deborah proceeded to throw a drink on Candace. And when Candace took up the bottle, y'all want to ask her what she would have done with it? She would have defended herself, because in that moment, she's in a hostile environment and she doesn't know what else is going to happen to her with her back turned and a drink being thrown at her. But y'all don't understand colorism and y'all don't understand colorist behavior. We're pointing it out. The treatment that we're seeing isn't fair treatment when it comes to Wendy, when it comes to Candace. I understand Giselle not feeling Wendy, but Wendy in approaching Ashley to give her a hug and Giselle sidestepping her and making up her face, that has some undertones of colorist behavior in and of itself, because Wendy wasn't going to hug her. And Giselle knew this. Referring to Candace as a that thing, it has some colorist undertones. But y'all don't want to talk about it because y'all want to believe that we're just making it up. That when somebody is in conflict, if a light-skinned woman is in conflict with a dark-skinned woman, it's not always colorism. And that's true. It's not always colorism. But when we're looking at it in the context of the show and how Giselle and Ashley, they navigate conflict with other people on the cast in comparison to how they navigate conflict with Candace and Wendy, then there's some disparities there. And it must be discussed. And it must be looked at through the lens of, is this colorist behavior? Is this colorism? And the truth is, it is colorist behavior. And Giselle and also Ashley, they are the main culprits on that show as it relates to colorist behavior on the cast of The Real Housewives of Potomac. Karen has also been guilty. Mia is also guilty of it in some ways. Her telling Candace, you can't do that. But she can get up and throw a drink at Wendy because Wendy said, I'm not going to check in with Peter when I'm in Miami because he's not my man. And if that's how you and your husband operates, that's not how me and my husband operates. But it's uncalled for Candace to tell a woman who's been spreading lies about her husband to get out of her face. Make it make sense. But in my opinion, Giselle and Ashley are the main culprits of colorist behavior. We have seen it with our own eyes. We've seen it. And y'all will say, well, they're friends with Nneka and they're friends with Charisse. Listen, on every TV show that I've watched growing up, there's always a token black friend who's either the butt of the joke or they're around so that the white person can say, oh, I'm not racist, I have black friends. Or I'm not colorist, I have dark-skinned friends. In my opinion, they had to embrace Nneka so that they could try to beat the colorist allegations. And the fact that they still chose not to pronounce Nneka's name correctly, and the fact that Nneka was so giddy to have them incorrectly pronounce her name, that says a lot in and of itself. And Nneka's out here doing interviews talking about reverse colorism and reverse racism exists. So those aren't great examples. And frankly, Charisse was a victim of Giselle's behavior in season 1. The fact that they got past it has more to do with the fact that Charisse hasn't really been on the show. So we haven't seen them navigate conflicts enough. So please don't use those two as examples of Giselle not having colorist behavior when there are plenty other examples that exist on the show. And the fact that she continues to deny it without asking, why are you guys saying this about me so that I can address it, also says a lot. It means she doesn't care. And she said that. She said that on Sherry Shepherd. She said, I don't care about the opinions of social media because social media doesn't pay me. So in essence, I'm going to behave the way I want to on the show, because even if social media is going to call it out, no one else is going to say anything to me about it. And that was clear on this reunion, because Candace, as I said, was told to tone yourself down, to lift Giselle up. And that's how I see things, y'all. Please drop down in the comment section below and tell me how you see things too. Please remember to like this video, share the link to my channel if you feel like my content needs some crowd, and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. As I always say, walk good. Bye.